She tested 27 men, and every single one failed. Billionaire CEO Vivian Hale had perfected the art of deception, disguising herself as broke, desperate, and ordinary on blind dates, waiting for someone to choose her heart over her money. But on date 28, something went terribly wrong. The grease-stained mechanic with calloused hands and a 7-year-old daughter didn't just pass her test, he made her forget why she was testing him at all. And when the truth finally exploded in the worst way possible, it would cost her everything she never knew she wanted. Stay with me until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of the downtown diner flickered twice before settling into their usual sickly yellow glow. Vivian Hale sat in the corner booth, deliberately chosen for its view of both entrances, her fingers wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that had seen better decades. The coffee inside had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but she kept it close anyway. A prop. Like everything else about her tonight. She wore a faded thrift store cardigan with a small unraveling thread at the cuff, jeans that were genuinely worn rather than designer distressed, and scuffed canvas sneakers she'd found at a second-hand shop in Queens. No makeup, except a hint of mascara. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The 2-carat diamond studs that normally graced her ears sat locked in a safe in her penthouse, replaced by simple silver hoops from a street vendor. Vivian Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Innovations, worth $2 billion according to the latest Forbes estimate, ranked among the 50 most powerful women in technology, had disappeared. In her place sat Vivi Chen, a 29-year-old temp worker between jobs, behind on rent, and desperate enough to try one more blind date arranged by a well-meaning friend. It was all a lie. It was all a test. And so far, 27 men had failed it spectacularly. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, her head of security, who was currently pretending to read a newspaper 3 booths away. Subject arriving in 2 minutes. Silver Honda Civic, plate ending in 4729. Vivian's pulse quickened despite herself. She'd been doing this for 2 years, 24 months of carefully orchestrated deception, and she still felt that spike of adrenaline before each date. Not excitement, more like the feeling of a scientist approaching a potentially dangerous experiment. Hope had died somewhere around date number 12, when a hedge fund manager she'd actually liked had called her a waste of his time after she'd claimed she couldn't split the check. The door chimed. A man walked in and Vivian's trained eye cataloged him in seconds. Mid-30s, maybe 6 feet tall, dark hair that needed a trim. He wore work pants with permanent grease stains that no amount of washing would ever remove, and a jacket that had been through multiple winters. His hands, she always looked at the hands, were clean but bore the telltale scars and calluses of someone who worked with them. Actually worked, not the soft-handed, I'm into woodworking on weekends kind of worked. He spotted her. She'd sent him a photo, carefully chosen to look like a casual selfie rather than the professional headshot she normally used, and his face broke into a genuine smile. Not the predatory once-over she'd learned to recognize, not the barely concealed disappointment of someone who'd expected a different package, just a smile. "Vivi?" he asked, approaching the booth. "That's me?" She gestured to the opposite seat. "You must be Lucas." Guilty as charged. He slid into the booth with a slight wince, and she caught the stiffness in his shoulders. "A long day, then." He noticed her noticing and gave a self-deprecating laugh. "Sorry, just finished a 12-hour shift, transmission rebuild that fought me every step of the way. I probably smell like motor oil." "I've smelled worse," Vivian said, which was true. She'd been in enough manufacturing facilities and hardware labs to be immune to industrial odors, but she softened it with a smile. "Long day, huh?" "Every day's a long day when you own the shop." Lucas flagged down the waitress, a tired-looking woman named Shelley according to her name tag, and ordered coffee. "You want anything?" "Actual food, not just—" He gestured at her cold cup. This was the moment where Vivian's script kicked in, where the test really began. She looked down at the table, letting embarrassment color her cheeks. It wasn't hard. She'd practiced this expression in the mirror until it looked natural. "I'm okay, not really hungry." "It's 7:30 and this is a diner." Lucas's voice was gentle, not pushy. "Nobody comes to a diner at 7:30 on a Friday night because they're not hungry. What's up?" Vivian took a breath. "Honestly, I'm a little short this week. Rent was due, and I'm between temp jobs, and She made herself meet his eyes. I'm sorry. This is embarrassing. I shouldn't have agreed to meet if I couldn't afford to order anything. This was where they usually failed. The good ones would offer to pay with barely concealed resentment, making her feel like a charity case. The mediocre ones would make excuses and leave. The worst ones, and there had been several, would lecture her about financial responsibility, about making better choices, about how they couldn't be with someone who didn't have their life together. Lucas did none of these things. Instead, he leaned back in the booth, studying her with steady brown eyes that held something she hadn't expected. Understanding. Not pity. Understanding. I got you, he said simply. 2 words. I got you. Vivian felt something crack in her chest, something she'd thought she'd sealed up tight 2 years ago. You don't have to, she started. I know I don't have to. Lucas accepted his coffee from Shelley and wrapped both hands around the cup like he was warming them. But here's the thing, Vivi. 6 years ago, I was living in my car with a 1-year-old baby girl because I just lost my job and couldn't make rent. A stranger bought me a meal at a place just like this. Didn't ask questions, didn't make me feel small. Just said, pay it forward when you can. So now I can, and you're sitting here hungry because life kicked you around a little. Seems pretty straightforward to me. He turned to Shelley. She'll have the meatloaf special. It's Friday, which means Gus makes it with the good gravy. And the pie. What's good today? Apple's fresh, Shelley said, scribbling on her pad. A small smile played at her lips like she was witnessing something she didn't see often enough. 2 slices of apple pie. Lucas looked at Vivian. Non-negotiable. I've been working since 6 this morning and I'm eating pie whether you judge me for it or not. Vivian laughed. Actually laughed. Not the practiced social laugh she used in board meetings, but a real one that surprised her. I would never judge someone for pie. Good. We're compatible already. Lucas grinned and Vivian noticed the laugh lines around his eyes, the kind that came from genuine happiness, not just frequent smiling. Shelley left with their order, and Lucas took a long sip of his coffee before speaking again. So, temp work, what kind? Receptionist stuff, mostly. Data entry, whatever I can find. The lies came easily now, polished by repetition. I studied marketing in college, but never really found my footing. The economy's tough, you know? Tell me about it. Lucas shook his head. I opened my garage right before the recession hit. Almost lost everything in the first 2 years. Banks wouldn't give me another loan. Suppliers wanted cash up front. I learned how to rebuild alternators from YouTube videos because I couldn't afford to buy new ones. But you made it, Vivian said. Barely. Still making it most days. He smiled, but there was a weight behind it. Ward's Auto Repair isn't going to make me rich, but it keeps the lights on, puts food on the table, and I get to be my own boss. Can't put a price on that. Actually, Vivian could put a precise price on that. She'd done the analysis when Hale Innovations had acquired a small startup, calculated the exact dollar value of autonomy, of not answering to investors or board members. But she stayed quiet, letting him talk. Plus, Lucas continued, his voice softening, it means I can adjust my schedule when I need to, for Rosie. Rosie? My daughter, she's 7. He pulled out his phone, an older model with a cracked screen protector, and showed her his lock screen. A little girl with dark curly hair and missing front teeth grinned at the camera, her face smeared with what looked like chocolate ice cream. She's with her grandma tonight. My mom watches her when I have plans. Vivian looked at the photo, at the pure joy captured there, and felt that crack in her chest widen. She's beautiful. She's chaos incarnate, Lucas said, but his voice was full of love. Last week she decided to give herself a haircut. Just grabbed the scissors and went for it. I came home and she looked like she'd fought a lawnmower. What did you do? Took her to a real barber to fix it, and we talked about how some things we need help with. Then we made a deal. She wants to learn to change oil on cars, so I'm teaching her. But she has to be patient and let me show her the right way, same as with haircuts. He shrugged. Being a parent is basically just negotiating with a tiny person who has no concept of consequences. The food arrived, and Vivian realized she actually was hungry. The meatloaf wasn't fancy. This wasn't one of the Michelin-starred restaurants where she usually dined, but it was hot and savory and came with real mashed potatoes, the kind someone had actually mashed. Her mom? Vivian asked carefully, taking a bite. Lucas's expression closed slightly, not hostile, but guarded. Not in the picture. Her choice. She left when Rosie was 8 months old, said she wasn't ready for motherhood, wasn't ready for the responsibility. He stabbed at his own meatloaf. Can't blame someone for knowing their limits, I guess. But Rosie deserves better than someone who sees her as a burden. That must have been hard, Vivian said quietly. Hardest thing I've ever done, those first few years. Working full-time, no sleep, a baby who wouldn't stop crying. My mom helped as much as she could, but she's got her own health issues. There were nights I just sat on the bathroom floor and cried because I didn't know if I could do it. He looked up, meeting her eyes. But you know what? I did. We did. And now I've got this incredible kid who thinks I'm a superhero because I can fix cars and make chocolate chip pancakes. Vivian found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested in a way she hadn't been with any of the previous 27 dates. What's the hardest part now? Lucas thought about it, chewing slowly. The guilt, I think. Working long hours means I miss stuff sometimes. Last month I missed her school play because a customer's car broke down and he needed it for work the next day. Rosie said she understood, but I could see it in her face, that disappointment. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm doing my best, but sometimes your best doesn't feel good enough. She knows you love her, Vivian said. That's what matters. I hope so. Lucas smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Anyway, enough about my complicated life. Tell me about you. What's your dream? Like, if money wasn't an issue and you could do anything? The question should have been easy. Vivian had prepared answers for dozens of scenarios. But something about the way Lucas asked it, genuine curiosity rather than interview-style vetting, made her pause. I don't know anymore, she said, and it was the first true thing she'd said all night. I used to think I knew. Had it all planned out. But life doesn't really care about your plans, does it? Not even a little bit, Lucas agreed. But that's okay. Plans change. Dreams change. The important thing is figuring out what actually makes you happy, not what you think should make you happy. They talked for 2 hours. Lucas told her about the time he accidentally locked himself in a customer's car and had to call Rosie's school to say he'd be late for pickup. Vivian, carefully editing out identifying details, talked about her college years when she'd been nobody special, just another computer science student with more ambition than sense. Lucas asked about her family, and she gave him the truth. Parents who'd passed away in a car accident when she was 23. No siblings. No close relatives. That's lonely, Lucas said softly. Sometimes, Vivian admitted. You build your own family though, right? Friends. Chosen family. Yeah, he smiled. And sometimes a grease-stained mechanic buys you meatloaf, and you realize people aren't all terrible. Sometimes, Vivian agreed. When Shelley brought the check, Lucas paid without ceremony. He didn't make a big show of it, didn't draw attention to his generosity. He just handed over cash. Vivian noticed he left a generous tip and suggested they take a walk. I've been sitting all day working on that transmission, he explained, and the night's nice, if you're not tired of me yet. They walked through the neighborhood, past closed shops and late-night bodegas, past couples and groups of friends and the constant hum of city life. Lucas talked about engines with the passion most people reserved for art or music. He explained how a transmission worked, how every piece had to fit perfectly, or the whole system failed, how the beauty was in the interconnection. It's like a conversation, he said, gesturing with his hands. All the parts talking to each other, working together. When it works right, it's almost music. When it doesn't, he laughed. Well, that's why I have a job. You really love what you do, Vivian observed. I really do. Is that weird? Loving something as ordinary as fixing cars. It's not weird at all. Vivian thought of her own work, the thrill of solving impossible problems, of building something from nothing. Passion is passion. Doesn't matter if it's cars or art or anything else. They ended up at a small park, sitting on a bench under a streetlight surrounded by moths. The city glowed around them, but for a moment it felt like they were in their own bubble. I had a good time tonight, Lucas said. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but I mean it. You're easy to talk to, Vivi. Real. Guilt twisted in Vivian's stomach. Real. If only he knew. I had a good time too, she said, and meant it. Can I see you again? Lucas asked. I mean, no pressure, but maybe lunch next week? There's a food truck near my shop that makes incredible tacos. And before you worry about money, my treat. I'm not keeping score. Vivian should have said no. The test was over. He'd passed. Passed with flying colors in a way that made all 27 previous dates look like the selfish, shallow encounters they'd been. She'd proven what she'd set out to prove, that finding someone who wanted her for herself, not her money, was nearly impossible. But Lucas was looking at her with those steady brown eyes, and Rosie's gap-toothed grin flashed through her mind, and Vivian heard herself say, I'd like that. Yeah? His smile was sunrise bright. Yeah. Lucas walked her to her subway stop, or rather to the subway stop she'd claimed was hers, 3 neighborhoods away from where she actually lived. At the entrance, he paused. I don't usually do this on first dates, he said. But can I hug you? Vivian nodded, not trusting her voice. His hug was warm and solid and smelled like coffee and motor oil, and something indefinably him. It lasted exactly the right amount of time, long enough to mean something, short enough to be respectful. When he pulled back, he was still smiling. Text me when you get home safe, he said. I will. And Vivi? He looked at her seriously. Whatever you're going through right now, the job stuff, the money stuff, it's temporary. You're smart and capable, and you're going to be okay. I can tell. If only you knew, Vivian thought. If only you knew who I really am. But she just smiled and said, Thank you. She watched him walk away, back toward wherever he'd parked his car, his hands in his pockets and his shoulders relaxed. Then she walked 2 blocks in the opposite direction, pulled out a real phone, the one Marcus was tracking, and called for her car. The black Mercedes pulled up 3 minutes later. Marcus held the door open, his expression carefully neutral. Well? He asked as she settled into the leather seat. Vivian looked out the window at the city passing by, at the world Lucas Ward lived in, a world of struggling and surviving and finding joy in small things, a world she'd left behind years ago if she'd ever truly inhabited it at all. Schedule another date, she said quietly. Ma'am? Marcus's surprise was evident even through his professional demeanor. With Lucas, schedule another date. Vivian pulled off the silver hoops, rubbed her temples. Tell him I said yes to lunch next week. The test is over, Marcus pointed out. He passed. That was the point. I know what the point was. Vivian's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. She took a breath, softened. One more date. I need to be sure. It was a lie. She knew it was a lie even as she said it. She didn't need to be sure. Lucas Ward had proven himself more than any of the other 27. He'd seen someone struggling and helped without judgment. He'd talked about his daughter with love and honesty. He'd been kind and genuine and real. But Vivian had been testing people for 2 years, and in that time she'd forgotten how to simply exist with another person, how to sit across from someone and feel that flutter of possibility, how to laugh and mean it, how to want more than just the satisfaction of proving her thesis. One more date, she told herself. Then she'd end it. Tell him the truth or make up an excuse. Disappear back into her real life. One more date wouldn't hurt. The car pulled up to her building, where the doorman greeted her by her real name, Ms. Hale, and Marcus escorted her to her private elevator. She rode it to the penthouse, to her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, to her designer furniture and expensive art, and all the trappings of a life built on silicon and code and carefully calculated risks. She poured herself a glass of wine, a 2015 Bordeaux that cost more than Lucas probably spent on groceries in a month, and stood at the window. Somewhere out there, Lucas was driving home in his silver Honda Civic with the plate ending in 4729. He'd probably check on Rosie, make sure she was asleep at his mother's house. Maybe he'd replay their date in his mind the way Vivian was replaying it now. Maybe he'd feel that same flutter of hope. Vivian's phone buzzed. Her real phone. The one that cost 4 figures and had more computing power than the first computer she'd built in her college dorm. It was a text from the number Lucas had. From Vivi. Home safe. Thank you for dinner. And the pie. Uh. She watched the three dots appear as he typed his response. Anytime. Sleep well, Vivi. Looking forward to tacos next week. Vivian set down her wine and picked up her tablet. She pulled up Lucas Ward's file, the background check Marcus had run before she'd even agreed to the date. It was all there. The bankruptcy when he was 28, right after his daughter's mother left. The struggle to keep his business afloat. His mother's medical bills. The car he drove had 180,000 miles on it. He rented a small apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't dangerous, but wasn't exactly safe either. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man doing his best in a hard world. And Vivian was lying to him with every breath. She closed the file, finished her wine, and went to bed in her king-sized bed with its 1,000 thread-count sheets. But sleep didn't come easy. Instead, she kept seeing Lucas's smile, kept hearing his voice. I got you. 2 words that meant everything, 2 words she didn't deserve. The next morning, Vivian woke to 17 emails marked urgent, a calendar full of meetings, and a board presentation that needed finalizing. She was Vivian Hale again, billionaire CEO, and Vivi Chen was just another disguise hanging in her closet. But as she sat in her corner office later that day, reviewing quarterly projections and strategic initiatives, her mind kept wandering. To a diner with flickering lights, to a man with grease-stained hands and a 7-year-old daughter, to the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, not because of what she could do for him, but simply because she was there. Her assistant knocked. Ms. Hale? The Peterson meeting is ready. Thank you, Jennifer. Vivian stood, smoothed her designer suit, became the woman the world expected her to be. But in her pocket, her phone buzzed with a message from Lucas asking if Wednesday worked for tacos, and for just a moment, Vivian let herself smile. One more date, she promised herself. Just one more. It was a promise she would break, because Lucas Ward had done something none of the other 27 men had managed. He'd made her forget she was testing him. He'd made her remember what it felt like to be just Vivian, not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the woman with trust issues and carefully constructed walls. Just Vivian, sitting across from someone who saw her and chose kindness. It was terrifying, it was intoxicating, and it was about to get infinitely more complicated. Wednesday arrived too quickly, and not quickly enough. Vivian found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, changing outfits 3 times, worried about how she looked. Not as the CEO in power suits and designer heels, but as Vivi, the broke temp worker who needed to look like she was still broke. She settled on the same jeans, a different thrift store top, and the canvas sneakers. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. And that was the point, wasn't it? Marcus drove her to within 3 blocks of Ward's auto repair, far enough that Lucas wouldn't see her getting out of a Mercedes. She walked the rest of the way, her breath misting in the October air. The shop was exactly what she'd expected, a 2-bay garage in a converted warehouse, the sign hand-painted and fading. Lucas's silver Honda sat in the parking lot next to 2 cars in various states of repair. Through the open bay door, she could see him bent over an engine, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Lucas?" she called. He looked up, and that smile, God, that smile, transformed his face. He wiped his hands on a rag and jogged over. "Perfect timing. Just finished up." He gestured to himself ruefully. "I'm a mess, though. Give me 5 minutes to clean up?" "Take your time." While he washed up in the small office bathroom, Vivian looked around the shop. It was meticulously organized, tools in their proper places, parts labeled and shelved. A small desk held paperwork and a desktop computer that had seen better years. On the wall hung a child's drawing, a stick figure labeled Daddy, standing next to a car, with I love you, spelled out in crooked letters decorated with hearts. "Rosie made that last year for my birthday," Lucas said, emerging from the bathroom in clean jeans and a t-shirt. "I know I should probably not hang customer invoices next to kids' artwork, but..." He shrugged. "It makes me happy." "It's perfect," Vivian said, and meant it. The taco truck, Miguel's Best Tacos, according to the hand-painted sign, was parked in a lot 6 blocks away. Lucas bought them each 3 tacos and a horchata, and they sat at a plastic table under an umbrella that had a rip in it. "So," Lucas said, unwrapping his first taco, "how was your week?" Vivian thought about the board meeting where she'd had to defend her decision to invest in a risky AI startup. The conference call with Tokyo that went until 2 in the morning. The profile piece Forbes wanted to run that she'd declined 3 times. Quiet, she said. Picked up a few temp shifts. Nothing exciting. How about you? Fixed 3 transmissions, an engine that threw a rod, and diagnosed a mysterious rattle that turned out to be a loose change rolling around in the door panel. He grinned. Also, Rosie lost her second front tooth. She put it under her pillow, and the tooth fairy left her $5. The tooth fairy's generous. The tooth fairy felt guilty for missing bath time 2 nights in a row, Lucas said wryly. But don't tell Rosie that. She thinks it's because she wrote a very polite letter. They ate and talked, and Vivian found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did anymore. Lucas asked questions. Where did she grow up? What were her hobbies? What did she like to read? But he didn't interrogate. When she asked about his business, he lit up, explaining his dream of maybe expanding someday, opening a second location, training young mechanics who couldn't afford trade school. There's this kid, Danny, who hangs around sometimes, Lucas said. 16, dropped out of school, living with his grandmother. He's got a real gift for engines. Just needs someone to teach him properly. I've been showing him stuff when I can. Can't pay him yet, but I give him lunch and he's learning. He looked almost embarrassed. It's not much. It's everything to him, Vivian said quietly, thinking of her own scholarship programs, the millions she donated anonymously to STEM education. But she donated money. Lucas was donating time, attention, himself. You're changing that kid's life. Maybe. Or maybe he'll get bored and move on. Lucas shrugged. But if I can be for him what someone else was for me, then it's worth it. After tacos, Lucas said, "Want to see something?" He drove them, Vivian's security team following at a discreet distance, to a neighborhood she didn't recognize. They parked outside a community center that had definitely seen better decades. I volunteer here Thursday evenings, Lucas explained as they walked in, teaching a basic car maintenance class. How to change a tire, check your oil, jump a battery, simple stuff that can save people hundreds in mechanic fees. He smiled sheepishly. I know it's not a fancy date, but I have to set up for tomorrow, and I thought, I don't know, maybe you'd want to come with. Vivian helped him carry in supplies, jacks and lug wrenches and containers of oil. A few people were already in the room, mostly women, mostly older, a few younger men. Lucas, a woman in her 60s waved. You bringing your girlfriend to show us up? This is Vivi, Lucas said, and Vivian noticed he didn't correct the girlfriend assumption. She's just helping me set up. But Vivian ended up staying for the whole class. Watching Lucas teach, patient and thorough and genuinely kind to every person who asked a question, she saw a different side of him. He treated a 70-year-old woman learning to change her first tire with the same respect he'd give a master mechanic. He praised effort, not just success. He made people feel capable. After class, as they loaded equipment back into his car, one of the students, a young mother who couldn't have been more than 22, approached. Thank you, she said to Lucas. My car broke down last week and I was going to pay someone $200 to fix it, but I remembered what you taught us and I did it myself. Save that money for my baby's doctor appointment instead. Lucas's face went soft. That's exactly why I do this. You did great. Driving Vivian back toward her supposed neighborhood, Lucas was quiet. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. He glanced at her. Nights like tonight remind me why I don't need to be rich or successful by other people's standards. That woman, she learned something that changed her life. That's worth more than any fancy car or big house. Guilt crashed over Vivian like a wave. She had the fancy car, multiple houses, more money than she could spend in several lifetimes. And here was Lucas, finding meaning in teaching a young mother to change her oil. You're a good person, she said quietly. I'm just a person, Lucas replied. We all are, just trying to do what we can with what we've got. He pulled up to her subway stop, the same one as last time, and turned to her. So, he said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. I really like spending time with you, Vivi, and I know we've only been on 2 dates, but I was wondering, would you want to meet Rosie? No pressure. I know meeting the kid is a big step, but she's been asking about you. I may have mentioned I was seeing someone, and I thought maybe we could go to the park or something this weekend, casual. Meet Rosie. Meet his daughter. That was a line Vivian hadn't crossed with any of the test dates. That was moving from experiment into real relationship territory. She should say no. Should end this now before it went any further. I'd love to, she heard herself say. Lucas's grin could have powered a small city. Yeah, okay, great. Saturday afternoon. There's a playground near my place. Rosie could bring her bike. Saturday's perfect. This time, when Lucas hugged her goodbye, Vivian let herself hold on a little longer. Let herself breathe him in, soap and coffee and something warm. Let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like if this were real. But it wasn't real. It was a test that had gone too far. And Vivian Hale, billionaire CEO, was playing a dangerous game with a good man's heart. She just didn't know how to stop. Saturday arrived wrapped in autumn sunshine, the kind of perfect October day that made the city feel almost forgivable. Vivian stood in front of her closet, the real one, filled with thousands of dollars worth of designer clothes, and pulled out the carefully curated Vivi wardrobe from the back corner. Jeans, a sweater that looked worn but not threadbare, the canvas sneakers. She braided her hair simply, the way she used to wear it in college before stylists and image consultants took over her life. In the mirror, she looked younger, softer, like someone who might reasonably work temp jobs and worry about rent, like someone who deserved Lucas Ward's smile. The lie sat heavy in her chest. Marcus drove her to within walking distance of the park, his silence more judgmental than any words. He'd made his concerns clear over the past week. This had gone beyond a simple test, beyond due diligence. This was personal now, and personal meant dangerous. Personal meant consequences. 2 hours, Vivian told him. I'll text when I'm ready. Ms. Hale, 2 hours, Marcus. She walked the remaining blocks alone, past brownstones and corner stores, into a neighborhood where children's laughter echoed from open windows, and people actually knew their neighbors' names. The park was small but well-maintained, with a playground that had seen recent updates and a bike path that curved around the perimeter. Lucas was easy to spot. He sat on a bench near the swings, and beside him stood a little girl in a purple jacket. Rosie, unmistakably, with her father's dark hair and a gap-toothed smile that could melt glaciers. She was talking animatedly, her hands moving as fast as her mouth, and Lucas listened with the patient attention of someone who considered his daughter's words the most important thing in the world. Then Rosie saw her. She stopped mid-sentence, tugged Lucas's sleeve, and pointed. Daddy, is that her? Lucas stood, and his smile made Vivian's stomach flip. Yeah, sweetheart, that's Vivi. Rosie ran over, all energy and enthusiasm, stopping just short of Vivian with the sudden shyness children sometimes get when meeting someone new. She looked up with enormous brown eyes. Hi, Rosie said. Daddy said you're really nice. Are you? The question was so earnest, so completely without guile, that Vivian felt something crack wider in her chest. She knelt down to Rosie's level. I try to be, Vivian said honestly. Are you? Most of the time, except when I don't want to eat vegetables. Daddy says I have to eat them, but they're gross. Rosie wrinkled her nose. Do you like vegetables? Some of them. Brussels sprouts are pretty good if you roast them. Rosie looked horrified. You're weird. Rosie, Lucas warned gently, but he was trying not to laugh. It's okay, Vivian said, standing. I am a little weird. Me too, Rosie brightened immediately. I like dinosaurs, and I can burp the alphabet up to the letter M. Want to see? Maybe later, Lucas said quickly. Why don't you show Vivi your bike riding? Rosie took off toward a small purple bicycle with training wheels and streamers on the handlebars. Lucas fell into step beside Vivian as they followed. Sorry, he said. She's been excited all morning. I may have oversold how cool you are. I don't know. I'm pretty cool. Vivian bumped his shoulder lightly. I know about roasted Brussels sprouts. That is pretty cool, Lucas agreed, and the look he gave her was warm enough to make her forget, temporarily, that everything about this was built on lies. They spent the next hour watching Rosie ride in circles, occasionally stopping to demonstrate her tricks, standing on the pedals, riding with no hands for 3 seconds, doing a jump that lifted the wheels maybe half an inch off the ground. Each accomplishment required applause and praise, which both Lucas and Vivian provided enthusiastically. She's going to be exhausted tonight, Lucas said as Rosie zoomed past. which means she'll actually go to bed on time for once. This is my secret strategy. Tire her out in the park? Tire her out everywhere. Parks, museums, the grocery store. Anywhere she can burn energy. He smiled. Being 7 is apparently very high octane. After biking came the playground. Rosie insisted Vivian push her on the swings, and as Vivian stood behind the swing set, giving gentle pushes and listening to Rosie's delighted shrieks, she felt the strangest sensation of belonging. Like this simple Saturday afternoon in a neighborhood park was somehow more real than her actual life. Higher, Rosie demanded. I want to touch the sky. Not too high, sweetheart, Lucas called from the bench. Remember what happened last time. I didn't fall that bad, Rosie called back. You scraped both knees and cried for 20 minutes. Only 15 minutes, Vivian laughed, and Lucas caught her eye across the playground. The expression on his face made her breath catch, soft and open and filled with something that looked dangerously like affection. Eventually, Rosie wore herself out and declared she was starving to death. Lucas produced juice boxes and crackers from a backpack that seemed to contain everything a child might need. Band-Aids, wet wipes, a change of clothes, 3 different types of snacks, and a small stuffed dinosaur named Herbert. They sat on the grass, Rosie between them, and shared crackers while Rosie told Vivian approximately 700 things about first grade. My teacher's name is Ms. Fati. Rodriguez, and she has a fish named Bubbles. And I sit next to Emma, who's my best friend except when she's not, and we're learning about the water cycle, and I can spell precipitation, which is a really big word, and Daddy says I'm smart like my grandma, and Rosie paused for breath. Do you have a job? The question caught Vivian off guard. Yes, I work in an office. Is it boring? Sometimes. Daddy's job isn't boring. He fixes cars and lets me help sometimes. I can identify a spark plug. Rosie puffed her chest out proudly. That's a real tool. That's very impressive, Vivian said, and meant it. Maybe Vivi could come see the shop sometime, Lucas suggested, if she wants. Yes, Rosie bounced excitedly. You have to come, and Daddy can show you the cool car, and I can show you my drawing on the wall, and you can meet Danny. He's like my older brother, except he's not really my brother, but he's nice, and he showed me how to whistle, and breathe, Rosie, Lucas said, laughing. They stayed at the park until the sun started sinking, casting long shadows across the grass. Rosie had moved on to the monkey bars, attempting them with the fearless determination of someone who hadn't yet learned that failure could hurt. She likes you, Lucas said quietly. He sat close enough that Vivian could feel the warmth of his arm against hers. She doesn't usually warm up to people this fast. She's wonderful, Vivian said honestly. You're raising a really great kid, Lucas. I'm trying. He watched Rosie hang upside down from the bars, her jacket riding up to expose her stomach. Some days I feel like I'm failing spectacularly, like I should be doing more, being more. But then she does something like spell precipitation or show kindness to a stranger, and I think maybe I'm not completely screwing it up. You're not screwing it up at all. Lucas turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made Vivian's pulse quicken. I really like you, Vivi. I know it's only been a couple weeks, but I feel like, I don't know, like I can breathe around you. Like I don't have to pretend to be anything I'm not. The irony of his words hit Vivian like a physical blow. He could be himself. She was the one pretending, lying, deceiving. She was the one who couldn't breathe under the weight of her own deception. Lucas, she started, but Rosie interrupted. Daddy, watch this. Rosie hung by her knees, arms spread wide. I'm a bat. I see you, Batgirl, Lucas called back. He stood, offered Vivian his hand. Come on, let's make sure our bat doesn't fall and crack her head open. Vivian took his hand, and he didn't let go as they walked toward the monkey bars. His palm was rough with calluses but warm, and his fingers threaded through hers like they'd been doing this for years rather than minutes. This is dangerous, Vivian thought. This is so dangerous. But she didn't pull away. By the time they left the park, Rosie was dragging her feet, her earlier energy completely depleted. Lucas scooped her up easily, and she rested her head on his shoulder with the boneless exhaustion of a child who'd played hard. I like Vivi, Rosie mumbled, her eyes already half closed. Is she your girlfriend, Daddy? Lucas glanced at Vivian over his daughter's head, a question in his eyes. "Would that be okay with you?" Vivian asked Rosie gently. "Mm-hmm. She's nice, and she doesn't think dinosaurs are just for boys." Rosie yawned hugely. "Emma's mom said dinosaurs are for boys, but that's stupid." "It is stupid," Vivian agreed. "See, Daddy? She's smart too." Lucas's apartment was a 15-minute walk, and he insisted on walking Vivian part of the way to her supposed subway stop first. Rosie fell asleep on his shoulder within 2 blocks, her small hands fisted in his jacket. "This is me being romantic," Lucas said wryly, "walking you home while carrying a sleeping 7-year-old. "It's perfect," Vivian said, and meant it more than she should have. They stopped at a corner 3 blocks from where Marcus was waiting with the car. The evening had turned cool, and Vivian could see her breath misting in the air. "Thank you for today," Lucas said. "For meeting Rosie, for spending your Saturday with us. I know this is a lot. Single dad, precocious kid, not exactly typical dating." "I had a really good time." Vivian reached out, gently brushed a strand of hair from Rosie's sleeping face. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." Lucas shifted Rosie's weight slightly. "Can I see you again? Soon?" "Yes." "Yeah?" His smile was sunrise bright even in the dimming light. "Wednesday? There's a farmer's market near my shop. Rosie loves it. We usually go after I pick her up from school." "Meet him again. Meet Rosie again. Keep building this beautiful, terrible lie." "I'd love that," Vivian heard herself say. Lucas leaned in, carefully, mindful of the sleeping child between them, and pressed a soft kiss to Vivian's cheek. It was chaste and gentle and somehow more intimate than anything Vivian had experienced in years. "Get home safe," he whispered. Vivian watched him walk away, his daughter secure in his arms, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't a test anymore. This wasn't research or due diligence or protecting herself from gold diggers. This was falling, and she had no idea how to stop. Marcus was waiting exactly where she'd left him, the Mercedes idling at the curb. He said nothing as she climbed in, but his expression spoke volumes. "Don't," Vivian said. "I wasn't going to say anything." "You're thinking it very loudly." Marcus pulled into traffic with his usual efficiency. After a long moment, he spoke. "He's a good man, Ms. Hale. And that little girl?" "I know." "So what's the endgame here?" Vivian stared out the window at the city passing by. "I don't know." "You're going to have to tell him eventually. The longer you wait—" "I said I don't know, Marcus." She heard the snap in her voice, took a breath. "I'm sorry. I need to think." But thinking was the problem. The more time Vivian spent with Lucas, the more she thought about what it would be like to actually be Vivi, to live in that simpler world where problems weren't measured in stock prices and board votes, where happiness came from Saturday afternoons in the park and a child's laughter. Back in her penthouse, Vivian poured wine she didn't drink and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city she technically owned a piece of. Her reflection stared back at her, designer clothes, perfect hair, the carefully constructed armor of a woman worth billions. She looked nothing like the woman Lucas had kissed goodbye. Her phone buzzed. Lucas, sending her a photo of Rosie asleep in her bed, still wearing her purple jacket, Herbert the dinosaur clutched in her arms. The message read, "She crashed before I could even get her into pajamas. Today was a good day. Thank you for being part of it." Vivian's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She should end this. Should tell him the truth, or make up an excuse, or simply disappear. It would hurt, but it would hurt less now than it would later. Instead, she typed, "Today was perfect. See you Wednesday." The next few weeks passed in a blur of double lives and divided hearts. Vivian would spend her mornings as the CEO, board meetings and investor calls and strategic decisions that affected thousands of employees. Then she'd transform into Vivi for evenings with Lucas, shedding her real life like a snake's skin. They went to the farmer's market, where Rosie insisted on picking out the strangest vegetables she could find, and Lucas patiently bought them all. They visited a used bookstore during an unexpected rainstorm, and Vivian watched Lucas read to Rosie in a corner while rain drummed against the windows. They had dinner at Lucas's apartment, spaghetti that Rosie helped make, which meant there was sauce on every surface, And Vivian helped with dishes while Lucas gave his daughter a bath. It felt like a life. It felt like a family. It felt like everything Vivian had been missing without realizing it. "Stay," Lucas said one night after Rosie had gone to bed. They sat on his second-hand couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Just for a while. We can watch a movie or just talk. I like talking to you." Vivian knew she should leave, should maintain boundaries, should remember this was supposed to be temporary. "Okay," she said. They didn't watch a movie. Instead, they talked, really talked, in a way Vivian rarely did with anyone. Lucas told her about the years after Rosie's mother left, the depression he'd fought, the nights he'd wondered if he was enough. Vivian talked about losing her parents, about the loneliness of success, about building walls so high she'd forgotten why she'd built them in the first place. "I used to think I had to be perfect," Lucas said quietly. "Perfect dad, perfect business owner, perfect at everything. But Rosie taught me that perfect isn't the goal, present is the goal. Showing up, trying your best, loving hard even when it's scary." "That sounds exhausting," Vivian said. "It is." Lucas smiled. "But it's also the only thing that matters." He kissed her then, really kissed her, and Vivian forgot every reason this was a bad idea. His hands were gentle on her face, his lips soft, and when he pulled back, he looked at her like she was something precious. "I'm falling for you," he whispered. "Is that okay?" No, Vivian thought. No, it's not okay because I'm lying to you about everything. "Yes," she said out loud. The cracks in Vivian's carefully constructed deception started small. A mention of a restaurant she shouldn't have been able to afford. A reference to a concert that hadn't been publicly announced yet. Knowledge about cars that a temp worker probably wouldn't have. Lucas didn't say anything, but Vivian saw the questions forming. Saw him watching her more carefully, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't quite understand. In early November, Lucas asked her to come to Rosie's school play. "She's a tree in the forest scene," he said, laughing. "Doesn't have any lines, just has to stand there. But she's very excited and specifically requested that you come." Vivian should have said no. The school meant other parents, meant staying in character for hours, meant deepening the lie to include more people. But the hope in Lucas's eyes, the image of Rosie as a tree, made her nod. "I wouldn't miss it." The school auditorium was packed with families, and Vivian sat next to Lucas in the third row, her heart pounding every time someone looked at her too long. She was wearing sunglasses indoors like some kind of celebrity cliché, claiming the fluorescent lights gave her migraines. Rosie was indeed a tree, a very enthusiastic tree who waved at them from the stage despite being specifically instructed to stand still. When the play ended, she ran to them with her construction paper leaves bouncing. "Did you see me? I was the best tree." "You were the best tree," Vivian agreed, scooping her up in a hug that felt dangerously natural. "Are you coming to dinner with us?" Rosie asked. "Daddy said we're getting pizza and I can have 2 slices and ice cream." Vivian looked at Lucas, who shrugged. "What can I say? I'm a pushover when she performs." She stood still for 4 minutes. That's a personal record. They went to a local pizza place, the kind with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. Rosie talked non-stop about the play, about her friend Emma, who forgot her lines, about how being a tree was harder than it looks because you can't scratch your nose. Watching Lucas with his daughter, patient and present and so full of love, Vivian felt something shift permanently inside her. This wasn't about testing anymore. This wasn't about protecting herself. This was about wanting something real with a desperation that scared her. On the walk back to Lucas's apartment, Rosie between them holding both their hands, she spoke without thinking. "I could fall in love with this," Vivian said quietly. Lucas looked at her over Rosie's head. The pizza? The life. This life. Something in Lucas's expression tightened, and for a moment, Vivian thought he was going to ask the question she dreaded. Instead, he just squeezed her hand and said, "Me too." That night, after Rosie was asleep and Vivian was getting ready to leave, Lucas stopped her at the door. "Vivi," he said carefully, "is there something you want to tell me?" Vivian's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Sometimes I feel like there's something you're not saying, Like there's a part of you I'm not seeing, and that's okay. We all have things we're not ready to share. But I want you to know that whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm not going to judge you or run away. This was it. The moment to come clean, to tell him everything and face the consequences. Lucas, Vivian started, her voice shaking. His phone rang. He glanced at it, cursed softly. It's my mom. She never calls this late unless something's wrong. I'm sorry, I have to. Answer it, Vivian said, relief and disappointment warring in her chest. It was his mother's heart. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that Lucas needed to go to the hospital. Vivian insisted on going with him, on sitting in the waiting room while doctors ran tests. At 2 a.m, when they finally got word that his mother would be fine, Lucas collapsed into the plastic chair beside her. Thank you, he said, for staying, for being here. I don't know what I would have done if… Hey, Vivian took his hand. She's okay. That's what matters. Lucas pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you, he whispered. God, Vivi, I love you. Is that crazy? We've only known each other a few weeks, but I love you. Vivian held him while her heart shattered into pieces. I love you too. It was the truest thing she'd said in months. It was also the cruelest lie. Because Lucas loved Vivi, broke, struggling, ordinary Vivi. He didn't know Vivian Hale existed. He didn't know the woman he loved was a phantom, a carefully constructed fiction designed to test his character. And now Vivian was trapped in a web of her own making, loving a man who loved someone who didn't exist. The reckoning, when it came, would destroy them both. The morning after the hospital, Vivian woke up in Lucas's apartment. She'd fallen asleep on his couch after they'd gotten back at 4 a.m, too exhausted to even think about going home. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and she could hear Lucas in the kitchen, the quiet clink of mugs and the hiss of a coffee maker. Daddy? Rosie's voice drifted from down the hall. Is Grandma okay? Grandma's fine, sweetheart. She's resting at the hospital and she'll come home soon. Is Vivi still here? Yeah, she's asleep on the couch. Come on, let's make breakfast quietly so we don't wake her. But Vivian was already awake, staring at the cracked ceiling and feeling the weight of her lies press down on her chest like concrete. She'd said she loved him. He'd said he loved her, and none of it was built on truth. She sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, her Vivi clothes, and she felt grimy and dishonest and so tired of pretending. Lucas appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. Hey, I thought I heard you moving. He handed her a mug, sat down beside her. How'd you sleep? Okay. Vivian wrapped her hands around the warmth. How are you doing? Better. Mom texted this morning. She's already complaining about the hospital food, so I know she's fine. He smiled, but exhaustion lined his face. Thank you again for last night, for everything. Rosie peeked around the corner, still in her dinosaur pajamas. Vivi, you're awake. Do you want pancakes? Daddy's making the good ones with chocolate chips. That sounds perfect, Vivian said, and Rosie beamed before disappearing back into the kitchen. They ate breakfast together, slightly burnt pancakes because Lucas kept getting distracted, and Rosie's enthusiastic chatter about a dream she'd had involving dinosaurs and spaceships. It felt domestic and warm and real, and with every passing moment, Vivian felt herself sinking deeper into a quicksand of her own creation. After breakfast, Lucas needed to visit his mother at the hospital and then open the shop. I hate to ask, he said, looking genuinely apologetic, but would you be able to stay with Rosie for a few hours? My mom usually watches her on Saturdays, but obviously she can't today, and I can't find a sitter on such short notice. Every rational part of Vivian's brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Spending more time with Rosie, becoming more embedded in their lives, making the inevitable reveal even more devastating. Of course, she said, we'll be fine. Lucas kissed her forehead, then Rosie's. Thank you. I'll be back by noon. Rosie, you listen to Vivi, okay? Be good. I'm always good, Rosie said with the complete confidence of someone who was definitely not always good. After Lucas left, Rosie looked up at Vivian with wide eyes. What do you want to do? What Vivian wanted to do was flee. Call Marcus, have him pick her up, retreat to her penthouse and her real life and forget this had ever happened. Instead, she looked around Lucas's small apartment, at the breakfast dishes still on the table, at the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, at the life Lucas was juggling alone. "How about we clean up a bit?" Vivian suggested. "Help your dad out?" Rosie wrinkled her nose. "Cleaning is boring. It's faster with two people, and then we can do something fun." They cleaned together, Rosie washing dishes while standing on a step stool and Vivian drying. They folded laundry. Vivian taught Rosie the efficient method she'd learned in college before she'd had people to do these things for her. They organized Rosie's toys, and Vivian found herself laughing as Rosie explained the complex social hierarchy of her stuffed animals. "Herbert is the king," Rosie said seriously, holding up the stuffed dinosaur. "But Mr. Whiskers thinks he should be king because he's a lion, but I told him that dinosaurs are bigger than lions, so Herbert wins." "That seems fair," Vivian agreed. By the time Lucas returned, the apartment was cleaner than Vivian had ever seen it. He stood in the doorway, looking around in amazement. "Did you two do all this?" "Vivi helped," Rosie announced proudly, "and she taught me the fast way to fold shirts, and we organized my toys and... Daddy, are you okay?" Lucas's eyes had gone suspiciously bright. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm just... yeah." He looked at Vivian with an expression that made her heart ache. "Thank you." "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing." Lucas crossed the room, pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. "You keep showing up for us," he whispered into her hair. "You keep being exactly what we need." Guilt crashed over Vivian in waves. She wasn't what they needed. She was a lie wrapped in deception, a billionaire playing dress-up in their lives. That afternoon, they took Rosie to the park again. The November air was crisp and cold, and leaves crunched under their feet as they walked. Rosie ran ahead, chasing pigeons with the eternal optimism of someone who'd never successfully caught one. "I've been thinking," Lucas said, his hand warm in Vivian's, "about what I said last night, about loving you." Vivian's stomach dropped. "Lucas, I meant it. I know it's fast. I know we're still getting to know each other, but I meant it." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "And I need you to know that whatever's going on with you, whatever you're dealing with that you're not ready to talk about, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "What if it's something big?" Vivian asked quietly. "What if it's something that changes everything?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, watching Rosie attempt to climb a tree. "Then we figure it out together. That's what people do when they love each other, right? They figure it out." "It's not that simple." "It could be." He cupped her face in his hands, those calloused, honest hands. "Vivi, I don't care if you're in debt or running from something or have a complicated past. I don't care if you're not who you think you should be. I care about who you are right now, in this moment. The woman who stayed at the hospital with me, who cleans my apartment and makes my daughter laugh, who looks at me like I'm worth something." Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. "You are worth something. You're worth everything. So are you." He kissed her softly. "So are you." Rosie ran back to them, leaves stuck in her hair. "I found a cool rock. Want to see?" They admired the rock, which looked like every other rock to Vivian, but Rosie insisted was special. They pushed her on the swings and played a game Rosie invented that seemed to have no rules except running in circles. They bought hot chocolate from a street vendor and sat on a bench, Rosie between them, her small body warm against Vivian's side. This could be my life, Vivian thought. This park, this man, this child, this beautiful, simple life. But it was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. The next week passed in a blur of stolen moments and mounting dread. Vivian knew she needed to tell Lucas the truth, but every time she tried, something stopped her. His smile, Rosie's laughter, the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. On Wednesday evening, she was in a board meeting, her real life intruding on the fantasy, when her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. She ignored it, focused on the presentation about Q4 projections. It buzzed again and again. During a break, she checked her messages. 3 photos from Lucas. The first showed Rosie holding up a drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands, labeled Daddy and Vivi. The second was Rosie wearing a too big t-shirt covered in grease, grinning beside a car engine. The third was just text. She asked when you're coming over again. I told her soon. That okay? Vivian stared at the photos while her CFO droned on about market share and competitive positioning. Two worlds, impossibly far apart. In one, she was Vivian Hale, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. In the other, she was Vivi, someone a 7-year-old missed. She typed back, "Tomorrow night? I can bring pizza." The response was immediate. "Perfect. We'll be the ones covered in motor oil." "Ms. Hale?" Her assistant Jennifer was looking at her expectantly. "Your thoughts on the acquisition?" Vivian put her phone down, forced herself back into CEO mode. "Move forward with due diligence, but I want detailed analysis on their workforce culture. Numbers matter, but so do people." After the meeting, Marcus cornered her in the hallway. "We have a problem." Vivian's blood went cold. "What kind of problem?" "Thomas Greer is asking questions about you, specifically about where you've been spending your time." Thomas Greer, board member, major investor, and the kind of man who saw knowledge as currency. He was also someone who'd made it clear he thought Vivian should be more visible, more social, more willing to play the game of wealth and power. "What kind of questions?" "About your evening schedule, your security detail. He implied you were seeing someone." Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "He has friends in interesting places, Ms. Hale. If he decides to dig deeper, he won't find anything." Vivian's voice came out sharper than intended. "You've been careful." "I've been careful. But you've been spending 3 or 4 evenings a week in that neighborhood. You've been photographed at parks, at diners. If someone decides to connect the dots, then I'll deal with it." Vivian started walking toward the elevator. "Is that all?" "No." Marcus fell into step beside her. "Ms. Hale, with all due respect, you need to end this, today, before it becomes a scandal that destroys both your life and his." "I know. So end it." "I said I know, Marcus." The elevator doors opened and Vivian stepped inside. "I'll handle it." But she didn't handle it. Instead, she showed up at Lucas's apartment the next night with pizza and garlic bread and let Rosie drag her to the garage to see the super cool engine they'd been working on all day. "It's from a 1967 Mustang," Lucas explained, his face lit with genuine excitement. "Customer wants it rebuilt to original specs. It's going to be beautiful when it's done." Vivian looked at the engine, a mass of metal and potential, and understood his passion. She'd felt the same way about code once, about building something complex and beautiful from individual pieces. "Can I help?" The words came out before she could stop them. Lucas's surprise was evident. "You want to help rebuild an engine?" "I want to try," Vivian smiled. "I'm probably terrible at it, but I want to try." So he taught her, showed her how to identify parts, how to clean and inspect each piece, how to handle tools with respect. Rosie helped by handing them wrenches and providing color commentary on everything. "You're actually pretty good at this," Lucas said after an hour. His hands were guiding hers, showing her how to properly torque a bolt. "You sure you haven't done this before?" "Never." Vivian was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body behind hers. "I'm just good at following instructions." "You're good at a lot of things." His voice was soft, intimate despite Rosie's presence across the garage. "You're good at making me feel like maybe I'm not doing this whole life thing alone anymore." Vivian turned to face him, still holding the wrench. "You're not alone." "No?" He smiled, and it was vulnerable and hopeful and everything Vivian didn't deserve. "Because sometimes I think about the future, our future, and I get scared that this is too good to be real, that I'm going to wake up and you'll be gone." "I'm not going anywhere," Vivian said, and even as she said it, she knew it was another lie. They had dinner in the apartment, pizza eaten straight from the box while sitting on the floor because Rosie insisted it was more fun. They watched a movie about dinosaurs that Rosie had seen approximately 50 times. They put Rosie to bed together, and Vivian read her a story while Lucas cleaned up the kitchen. "Vivi," Rosie said sleepily, clutching Herbert, "are you going to be my new mom?" Vivian's breath caught. That's a big question, sweetie." "I know, but I asked Daddy if you could be my mom, and he said that's something we'd all have to talk about together when I'm older, But I'm 7 now, and that's pretty old. Rosie's eyes were already closing. I think you'd be a good mom. You're nice, and you know about dinosaurs, and you don't mind when I'm loud. Thank you, Vivian whispered, her throat tight. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Love you, Vivi, Rosie mumbled, already halfway to sleep. I love you too, Vivian said to the darkness. To this child she had no right to love. Lucas was waiting in the living room when she emerged. She asleep? Out cold. Vivian sat beside him on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Lucas, we need to talk. That sounds ominous. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago. Vivian took a breath, tried to find the words. I'm not... His phone rang. He glanced at it, swore softly. It's the hospital again. My mom... Answer it, Vivian said, reprieve and guilt washing over her in equal measure. This time, his mother had discharged herself against medical advice and was currently causing a scene in the hospital lobby. Lucas needed to go get her, to talk sense into her, to somehow manage his stubborn mother and his business and his daughter and everything else life kept throwing at him. I'm sorry, he said, already grabbing his jacket. I know we need to talk, but go. Take care of your mom. We can talk later. Stay here with Rosie? I'll be back in an hour, 2 tops. Vivian should have said no. Should have left. Should have put distance between herself and this family she'd infiltrated with her lies. But Lucas looked so stressed, so overwhelmed, and Rosie was asleep in the next room, and Vivian found herself nodding. Of course, go. After he left, Vivian sat in the quiet apartment, surrounded by evidence of Lucas's life. Photos on the walls, Rosie as a baby, Lucas and his mother, birthday parties and school events. Drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, a stack of bills on the counter that probably kept him up at night. This was real. This life, this struggle, this love. It was all real. And she was poisoning it with every breath. Vivian pulled out her phone, her real phone, and scrolled through her messages. 17, unread from board members and executives. 3 from Jennifer about tomorrow's schedule. 1 from Thomas Greer. We need to discuss your recent activities. Call me. She deleted it without responding. Then she opened a new message to Marcus. I need you to look into something. Quietly. I want to know what Greer knows. The response came within seconds. Already on it. You need to see something. Can I come by? I'm not at home. I know where you are, Ms. Hale. I'm your security. I'm always watching. 20 minutes later, Marcus appeared at Lucas's door. Vivian let him in, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Rosie. This better be important. It is. Marcus pulled out a tablet, showed her a photo. This was taken 3 days ago. Vivian stared at the screen. It was her and Lucas sitting on a bench in the park, Rosie between them. The photo was long range but clear enough. And there, in the background, barely visible, another photographer. Professional equipment, not paparazzi. Something worse. Private investigator, Marcus confirmed. Hired by Greer 2 weeks ago. He's been documenting your movements, building a file. Why? Best guess? He wants leverage. He's been pushing for changes at Hale Innovations, and you keep blocking him. He thinks if he can create a scandal, or threaten to, you'll be more willing to negotiate. Vivian felt ice flood her veins. What does he have? Marcus swiped to the next image. Another photo of her and Lucas. Then another. And another. A whole series documenting their relationship. But in none of them was Vivian clearly visible. She'd been careful about that, at least. He doesn't know it's you yet, Marcus said. But he's close. The investigator has been asking questions in the neighborhood. Someone at the diner remembered you. It's only a matter of time before he makes the connection. How much time? Days? Maybe a week if we're lucky. Vivian stared at the photos, at the evidence of her deception laid out in brutal clarity. What do I do? You know what you have to do, Ms. Hale. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. You end it, tonight, before Greer can weaponize this, before it destroys you both. Lucas isn't involved in any of this. He doesn't even know who I am. Which makes it worse. When this comes out, and it will come out, he'll be collateral damage. The media will tear him apart. Every aspect of his life will be scrutinized. His business, his daughter, everything. Marcus paused. You care about him, I can see that. So protect him. End it now, cleanly, before it becomes a circus. Vivian knew he was right. Knew that every day she continued this charade, she was putting Lucas and Rosie at greater risk. But the thought of walking away, of never seeing his smile or hearing Rosie's laugh, it felt impossible. I'll tell him the truth, she said finally. I'll explain everything and let him decide. Miss Hale, he deserves the truth, Marcus. I've lied to him about everything else. I owe him this. The truth will hurt him more than a clean break. Maybe, but it's still his choice to make, not mine. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're in love with him. It wasn't a question, but Vivian answered anyway. Yes. Then you know that loving someone sometimes means letting them go. Before Vivian could respond, they heard a key in the lock. Lucas was back, earlier than expected. Marcus slipped out through the back entrance, a security precaution Lucas didn't even know existed, leaving Vivian alone to face the man she'd been lying to for months. Hey, Lucas said, looking tired but relieved. Got Mom settled. She's stubborn as hell, but she's okay. He noticed Vivian's expression. What's wrong? We need to talk. Vivian's voice shook despite her best efforts. I need to tell you something. Something big. Lucas sat down beside her on the couch, concern evident in his face. Okay, I'm listening. Vivian opened her mouth to speak, to finally tell the truth, to burn down everything they'd built with the fire of honesty. And then Rosie screamed. They both ran to her room, where Rosie sat up in bed, sobbing and disoriented from a nightmare. Lucas scooped her up, rocking her gently while she cried about monsters and being lost. You're okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here. You're safe. Is Vivi still here? Rosie hiccuped through her tears. I'm here, Vivian said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. No monsters are going to get you. Your dad and I won't let them. Rosie reached for her, and Vivian found herself holding this child who loved her, who trusted her, who had no idea that the real monster was already in the room, wearing Vivi's face. It took 30 minutes to calm Rosie down and get her back to sleep. By the time they returned to the living room, the moment had passed. Lucas looked exhausted, running on empty after a day of crisis management. What did you want to talk about? He asked, stifling a yawn. Vivian looked at him, this good, kind, tired man who loved her, and felt her courage fail. It can wait, she heard herself say. You need sleep. You sure? I'm sure. Get some rest, Lucas. He pulled her into a hug, held her close. Thank you for being here tonight, for everything. I don't know what I'd do without you. Neither do I, Vivian thought. Neither do I. She left shortly after, walking the 3 blocks to where Marcus waited with the car. She climbed in without a word, and they drove through the city in silence. You didn't tell him, Marcus observed. No. You're running out of time, Ms. Hale. I know. But knowing and doing were 2 different things. And as Vivian sat in the back of her Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past, she realized she was trapped in a cage of her own making. Every day she didn't tell Lucas the truth. The lie grew bigger. Every moment she spent with him and Rosie, the inevitable destruction grew more catastrophic. She had built this test to protect herself from men who wanted her money. Instead, she'd found a man who wanted nothing from her but honesty, the one thing she couldn't give him. And now the walls were closing in. The reckoning was coming, whether she was ready or not. The next morning, Vivian woke to her alarm at 5:30, the city still dark beyond her penthouse windows. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the moment she'd almost told Lucas the truth, the moment Rosie had screamed, the moment she'd chosen cowardice over honesty once again. She went through her morning routine on autopilot: shower, hair, makeup, the armor of a power suit. By 7, she was in her office reviewing contracts. By 8, she was in a meeting with her executive team. By 9, she'd made 3 decisions that would affect hundreds of employees and approved a budget that contained more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime. And through it all, she thought about Lucas's hands covered in engine grease, about Rosie asking if she could be her new mom, about a life that felt more real than anything in her gleaming corner office. Ms. Hale? Jennifer appeared in her doorway, looking nervous. Thomas Greer's here. He says it's urgent. Vivian's blood went cold, but she kept her expression neutral. Send him in. Thomas Greer entered like he owned the place, which, given his share percentage, he partially did. He was 63, silver-haired, and had the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no. He sat down without being invited. Vivian, we need to talk. So talk. She didn't offer him coffee, didn't pretend this was a social call. I'm concerned about your focus lately. You've been distracted, absent from important social functions, unavailable during key evening hours. He leaned forward. The board notices these things. I've missed 0 board meetings, and my performance metrics are the strongest they've been in 3 years. My personal time is my own. Not when it affects the company's reputation. Greer pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. It was her and Lucas at the diner that first night. Blurry but recognizable. Care to explain who this is? Vivian's heart hammered, but years of high-stakes negotiations had taught her to never show fear. I fail to see how this is any of your business. It's my business when our CEO is slumming in rundown neighborhoods with blue-collar workers. What would our investors think? What would the media say if they knew billionaire Vivian Hale was pretending to be poor? You've been having me followed. I've been protecting my investment. Greer smiled, and it was predatory. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to support my proposal for the automotive division restructuring. You're going to stop blocking my initiatives at every turn. And in exchange, I'll keep this little indiscretion quiet. Vivian stood, her voice cold as winter. Get out of my office. Excuse me? You heard me. Take your photos and your threats and your pathetic attempt at blackmail and get out. If you ever have me followed again, I'll have you removed from the board so fast your head will spin. I have enough votes to do it, and we both know it. Greer stood slowly, his face flushing with anger. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was not doing this sooner. You have 5 seconds to leave before I call security. He left, but his parting words echoed in the office. This isn't over, Vivian. One way or another, the truth always comes out. After he was gone, Vivian sank into her chair, her hands shaking. Marcus appeared in her doorway within seconds. He'd obviously been listening. He's going to leak it, Marcus said quietly. Maybe not today, but soon. He'll make sure the story gets out, and he'll make sure it's as damaging as possible. I know. So you need to control the narrative. Tell Lucas yourself before Greer can weaponize it. I need time to think. You don't have time. Marcus's voice rose, something it rarely did. Ms. Hale, with all due respect, you're out of time. Greer is going to burn this down, and he's going to take Lucas and Rosie with it. The only way to minimize the damage is to get ahead of it. Vivian knew he was right. She'd known it for weeks, if she was being honest. But knowing and accepting were 2 different things. And the thought of seeing Lucas's face when he learned the truth, when he realized the woman he loved didn't exist, made her want to run. Tonight, she said finally. I'll tell him tonight. She spent the rest of the day in a fog of dread. Every meeting felt meaningless, every decision hollow. She drafted and deleted a dozen texts to Lucas, trying to find words that didn't exist. How did you tell someone their entire relationship was built on a foundation of lies? At 4 o'clock, her phone rang. Lucas. Hey, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I know this is last minute, but Rosie wants to know if you can come to dinner tonight. She made you something at school, and she's dying to show you. Vivian closed her eyes. Perfect timing, universe. Perfect, terrible timing. I'll be there, she said. What time? 6? And Vivi? His voice softened. I'm really glad you're in our lives. Both of us are. After he hung up, Vivian sat in her office and let herself cry for the first time in months. Not the careful, controlled tears she'd allowed herself after her parents died, but great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the lies she'd told, for the family she was about to lose, for the woman she'd been before fear had turned her into someone who tested people like lab experiments. At 5:30, she went home to change. She stood in front of her closet, the Vivi section and the Vivian section, and made a decision. She pulled out jeans and a simple sweater, but this time she added the diamond studs, the designer watch. Small things, but real things. pieces of her actual self. If she was going to confess, she'd do it as herself. No more complete disguises. Marcus drove her to Lucas's neighborhood in silence. When they pulled up, she turned to him. If this goes badly, it's going to go badly, Ms. Hale. I know, but if he... She stopped, swallowed hard. Make sure he and Rosie are protected. From the media, from Greer, from all of it, whatever it costs. Already arranged. Marcus's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. That doesn't make it any easier. She walked the 3 blocks to Lucas's apartment, her heart in her throat. She could hear Rosie's laughter before she even knocked on the door. Lucas answered, Rosie bouncing beside him. You're here! Come in! Come in! The apartment smelled like marinara sauce and garlic bread. Rosie grabbed Vivian's hand immediately, dragging her to the kitchen table where a piece of construction paper sat. I made you a card, Rosie announced. See? That's you and me and Daddy. We're a family. The card showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Hearts and stars covered every available space, and in wobbly letters across the top, I love Vivi. Vivian felt her heart crack clean through. It's beautiful, Rosie. I love it. You can keep it forever and ever. Put it on your fridge so you remember us. I could never forget you, Vivian whispered, and it was the truest thing she'd said in months. Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs, Rosie's favorite. They ate at the small kitchen table, Rosie chattering about school and her friend Emma, and a boy named Tyler who ate paste. Lucas kept catching Vivian's eye, smiling like he had a secret. After dinner, while Rosie was in the bathroom washing tomato sauce off her hands and face, Lucas pulled Vivian aside. I wanted to talk to you about something, he said, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. Before, when you said we needed to talk, I've been thinking about that, about us, about where this is going. Lucas, let me finish, please. He took her hands in his. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a couple months. But Vivi, I want this to be real. I want a future with you. I want Rosie to have someone who loves her the way you do. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep next to you and build a life together. Stop, Vivian said, her voice breaking. Please stop. Why? Don't you want that too? Lucas, I need to tell you something. Something that's going to change everything. His expression shifted, concern replacing hope. Okay, what is it? Vivian opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the doorbell rang. Lucas frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. Hold that thought. He went to answer the door, and Vivian heard a woman's voice, sharp and professional. Lucas Ward? I'm Rebecca Chen from the Metropolitan Times. I'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Vivian Hale. The world stopped. Lucas's confused voice. I'm sorry. Who? Vivian Hale, CEO of Hale Innovations, worth approximately $3 billion. You've been seeing her for the past 2 months. I think you have the wrong person. I'm dating someone named Vivi Chen. She's a temp worker. The reporter laughed. Vivi Chen doesn't exist, Mr. Ward. Your girlfriend is one of the wealthiest women in America, and she's been lying to you. Vivian stood frozen in the kitchen as the words detonated like bombs. Rosie appeared from the hallway, sensing something was wrong. Daddy, what's happening? Lucas turned, and Vivian saw the exact moment her world ended. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with confusion and dawning horror. Is that true? His voice was barely a whisper. Tell me that's not true. Vivian couldn't speak, couldn't move. The reporter pushed into the apartment, camera in hand, sensing blood in the water. Ms. Hale, would you like to comment on why you've been conducting an elaborate deception? Were you testing him? Was this some kind of social experiment? Get out, Lucas said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my house right now. The public has a right. I said get out. Lucas moved toward the reporter, and something in his face must have convinced her because she backed out quickly, still filming. The door slammed. Silence fell like a guillotine. Rosie started crying. Why is everyone yelling? Go to your room, sweetheart. Lucas's voice was controlled now, deadly calm. Please. I need to talk to Vivi, to... He couldn't even say the name. But Daddy... Now, Rosie. Rosie fled to her room, sobbing, and the sound of it broke something fundamental in Vivian's chest. Lucas turned to her, and the look on his face was worse than anger. It was betrayal, complete and utter betrayal. Is it true? He asked. Any of it? Yes. Vivian's voice came out hoarse. My name is Vivian Hale. I'm the CEO of Hale Innovations. Everything else, Vivi Chen, the temp work, being broke, that was all a lie. Why? The word cracked like a whip. Why would you do this? I was testing. She stopped at the look on his face. I wanted to know if someone could love me for me, not my money. So I pretended to be poor to see if I'd pass your test. Lucas laughed, bitter and broken. Jesus Christ, this entire time you were testing me like I was some kind of experiment? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Vivian? He spat her real name like poison. Explain to me how lying to me for months, infiltrating my life, gaining my daughter's trust. Explain how that was anything other than cruel. I fell in love with you. Vivian was crying now, tears streaming down her face. It started as a test, but it became real. What I feel for you is real. Nothing about this is real, Lucas shouted. The woman I fell in love with doesn't exist. Vivi doesn't exist. You made her up. I'm still me. No, you're not. Vivi was kind and honest and real. Vivi struggled and survived and understood what it was like to worry about rent and work for every dollar. You? He gestured at her watch, her earrings, the pieces of Vivian she'd worn tonight. You're a billionaire who plays dress-up in other people's lives. That's not fair? Fair? Lucas's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? You stood in my home. You ate at my table. You held my daughter while she cried from nightmares. You let her love you. You let her call you. His voice broke. She asked if you could be her mother. I know. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo months of lies. Every moment we spent together, every word you said, every time you touched me, all of it was built on deception. He ran his hands through his hair, looking shattered. God, I told you I loved you. I told you about my fears, my failures, everything. And you were just gathering data, weren't you? Running your little experiment. No, Lucas, I love you. I love Rosie. That part was never fake. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? He laughed again, that awful broken sound. For all I know, you're still lying. Maybe this is part of the test. Maybe you're recording this to see how I react when I find out the truth. I'm not... A crash from Rosie's room made them both freeze. They ran down the hall to find Rosie standing by her window, her small hands bleeding. She'd punched through the glass. Rosie! Lucas scooped her up, rushing to the bathroom. What did you do? I wanted to leave, Rosie sobbed. You were yelling, and Vivi was crying, and I wanted to go to Grandma's, but the window wouldn't open, so I hit it, and blood was everywhere. Vivian grabbed towels while Lucas ran Rosie's hands under water, both of them working together through pure instinct. It's okay, sweetheart. You're okay. Let Daddy see. It hurts, Rosie wailed. And you and Vivi were fighting, and I don't understand why everyone's upset. We need to get her to the hospital, Vivian said, examining the cuts. These need stitches. Lucas looked at her, and for a moment the anger faded into shared panic. My car's dead. I was supposed to fix it tomorrow. I'll call, Vivian started. No. Lucas's voice was steel. You've done enough. Get out. Lucas, she needs... I said get out. He was holding Rosie, blood soaking through the towels, and his eyes were wild with pain and fury. You don't get to be here anymore. You don't get to help. You don't get to pretend you're part of this family after what you've done. Let me at least get you to the hospital. Leave. The word was a roar. Leave now before I say something I can't take back. Vivian stood there, helpless, watching this man she loved hold his bleeding daughter, knowing she'd caused this, all of it. The lies, the pain, the broken glass. It all traced back to her and her cruel, selfish test. She pulled out her phone, texted Marcus. Emergency, Lucas's apartment. Rosie's hurt. Get them to the hospital. Now. Then she looked at Lucas one more time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the cold November night. Behind her, she could hear Rosie crying, could hear Lucas trying to comfort her while calling his mother. Marcus pulled up within 2 minutes, but instead of opening the door for Vivian, he got out and ran into the building. She understood. He was making sure Rosie got the medical attention she needed, regardless of Lucas's pride or anger. Vivian stood on the sidewalk shaking as her life imploded around her. Within minutes, other cars arrived. More reporters somehow alerted to the story. Cameras flashed, questions shouted. Ms. Hale, is it true you deceived Lucas Ward? Were you conducting a social experiment? How does it feel to manipulate a single father? She ignored them all, walking blindly until she found herself at the park where she'd pushed Rosie on the swings. She sat on a bench in the dark, alone, and let the full weight of what she'd done crush her. She'd wanted to test if someone could love her without her money. Instead, she'd proven that she didn't deserve love at all. Not Lucas's love, not Rosie's, not anyone's. Her phone rang. Marcus. They're at St. Mary's. Rosie needed 12 stitches on her right hand, 6 on her left. She's going to be fine, physically. Mr. Ward refused to let me pay for anything. Marcus paused. He's destroyed Ms. Hale. I've seen a lot in my career, but that man looked like his world had ended. Because it did, Vivian said numbly. Because I ended it. What do you want me to do? Keep them safe. From the reporters, from Greer, from all of it. I don't care what it costs. And Marcus? Her voice cracked. Make sure they know I'm sorry. Even if Lucas never wants to hear from me again, make sure they know that. I will. Vivian sat in that park for hours, long after the cold had seeped into her bones. She watched the place where she'd played with Rosie, where she'd held Lucas's hand, where for a few brief weeks she'd been part of something real and beautiful. She'd built a test to protect her heart. Instead, she'd destroyed the only thing that had made her heart worth protecting. When she finally went home, the sun was rising over the city. Her penthouse felt cavernous and empty, all her wealth and success suddenly meaningless. She looked at Rosie's card on the table where she'd set it, 3 stick figures holding hands, I love Vivi, across the top. But Vivi didn't exist, and Vivian Hale had just learned that sometimes the cruelest tests are the ones we inflict on ourselves. The story broke everywhere within 12 hours. By morning, Vivian's face was plastered across every news site and social media platform. The headlines were brutal and relentless. Billionaire CEO's cruel social experiment exposed. Tech mogul. Vivian Hale deceives single father in twisted test. The woman who had everything, except empathy. Vivian sat in her office with the blinds drawn, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. Her phone rang constantly, board members demanding explanations, investors expressing concern, PR teams scrambling for damage control. She ignored them all. Jennifer knocked softly. Ms. Hale, the board wants an emergency meeting. Thomas Greer is calling for your resignation. Let them call. Vivian's voice was hollow. Cancel all my meetings for the week. But Ms. Hale, all of them, Jennifer. I don't care what they are. After Jennifer left, Marcus appeared with coffee Vivian wouldn't drink and a tablet showing the latest coverage. Lucas's face was everywhere now, too. The news had found photos of him, of his shop, of Rosie. The media was calling him the victim of a billionaire's heartless game. They're camped outside his apartment and his business, Marcus reported. I've stationed security to keep them at a distance, but he's refused any other help. He won't take my calls. And Rosie? At her grandmother's. She hasn't been to school since it happened. Mr. Ward is... Marcus hesitated. He's not doing well, Ms. Hale. Vivian closed her eyes against the wave of pain. 3 days since that horrible night, and she could still hear Rosie crying, still see the betrayal in Lucas's eyes. There's something else, Marcus said carefully. Someone started a fundraiser online for Mr. Ward's business and Rosie's future. It's raised over $200,000 in 48 hours. Good, Vivian whispered. That's good. The organizer is anonymous, but I suspect you already know who it is. She did. She'd set it up through a shell company within hours of leaving Lucas's apartment, seeding it with enough money to make it trend. At least she could do something right, even if he'd never know it came from her. Ms. Hale, you need to make a statement. The silence is making things worse. What am I supposed to say, Marcus? That I'm sorry? That I didn't mean to hurt them? She laughed bitterly. I did hurt them. Intentionally. I built an elaborate lie and dragged a good man and his daughter into it. There's no statement that makes that okay. Then tell the truth. Explain why you did it. The truth makes it worse. Vivian looked at him with hollow eyes. The truth is, I was so damaged by past betrayals that I turned into someone who tests people like they're equations to be solved. The truth is, I fell in love with Lucas and still kept lying because I'm a coward. The truth is, I deserve everything they're saying about me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. But she did know. She knew because the board meeting Jennifer had mentioned wasn't optional. She knew because Thomas Greer was circling like a shark, ready to use this scandal to force her out. She knew because every second she remained as CEO, the company she'd built from nothing suffered. That afternoon, Vivian called an emergency board meeting. She walked into the conference room in her armor, the power suit, the heels, the carefully applied makeup that hid 3 days of no sleep. Every board member was already seated, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed satisfaction. Thomas Greer looked smug. Vivian, thank you for finally joining us. Let's skip the pleasantries, Thomas. Vivian remained standing at the head of the table. You want my resignation. Fine. You'll have it. But first, you're going to hear what I have to say. The board has already discussed, Greer started. I don't care what the board discussed. Her voice cut through the room like steel. For 10 years, I have poured everything into this company. I built it from a startup in my apartment to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I made you all wealthy beyond measure. And yes, I made a terrible mistake in my personal life. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, but that mistake doesn't erase a decade of success. Your personal conduct reflects on, another board member began. My personal conduct is mine to answer for, not yours to weaponize. Vivian turned to Greer. You leaked this story. You hired the investigators, fed information to the press, orchestrated this entire circus, not because you cared about Lucas Ward or ethical conduct, but because you wanted leverage, because I wouldn't bend to your demands. That's a serious accusation, Greer said, but his face had paled. It's also provable. I have receipts, Thomas, communications between you and the reporter, payment records to the investigators, everything. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. So here's what's going to happen. I'm stepping down as CEO, effective immediately, but you're stepping down from the board, today. Because if you don't, every single piece of evidence goes to the SEC and the press. Your choice. Greer opened the folder, and Vivian watched the color drain from his face. The room erupted in chaos. Board members demanding explanations, Greer sputtering denials. Vivian let it wash over her. Jennifer has my resignation letter and the transition plan, she said calmly. David Chen will assume CEO responsibilities. He's more than qualified. As for my shares, I'm placing them in a trust that will vote with the board majority for the next 5 years. I'm removing myself completely. Vivian, you don't have to, one of the kinder board members said. Yes, I do. She looked around the table at the people she'd worked with for years. I do have to, because what I did was wrong, and there need to be consequences. I hurt people, real people with real lives, and I need to face that, not hide behind corporate protections and PR spin. She walked out of the conference room, out of the building she'd designed, away from the company that had been her entire identity for a decade. Jennifer met her at the elevator with a box of personal items. So few things to show for so many years. Ms. Hale, I'm so sorry, Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. Don't be. This is what I deserve. Vivian took the box. You'll be great working with David. Better than you were with me, probably. That's not true. You are, an incredible leader. I was a good CEO, Vivian corrected gently. But I was a terrible person. There's a difference. She left the building for the last time, climbed into the Mercedes where Marcus waited. "Where to, Ms. Hale?" For the first time in 3 days, Vivian knew the answer. "Lucas's shop. I need to see him." "Ms. Hale, I don't think that's wise." "I don't care if it's wise. I need to apologize. To his face. He deserves that much." The drive across the city felt like traveling through a life she'd briefly inhabited. Past the diner where she'd met Lucas, past the park where she'd pushed Rosie on the swings, into the neighborhood that had felt more like home than her penthouse ever had. Ward's auto repair looked different in the afternoon light. The parking lot was empty except for Lucas's Honda, and through the bay door she could see him bent over an engine, working alone. No reporters remained. Marcus's security had done its job, but the damage was already done. Vivian got out of the car, told Marcus to wait, and walked toward the shop on shaking legs. Lucas didn't look up as she approached, just kept working with methodical precision. "Shop's closed," he said without turning around. "Lucas, please. I need to talk to you." His hand stilled on the wrench. Slowly, he straightened and turned to face her. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. When he saw her, something flashed across his face, pain so raw it made Vivian step back. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "I will. I need to say I'm sorry. I need you to hear it from me, not through lawyers or statements. What I did was unforgivable. I know that. But I need you to know that what I felt for you was real. My love for you and Rosie, that was never part of the test." "Don't," Lucas's voice broke. "Don't talk about Rosie." "How is she? How do you think she is?" Anger bled into his tone now. "She cries herself to sleep every night asking why Vivi left. She doesn't understand that Vivi never existed. How do I explain that to a 7-year-old? How do I tell her that someone she loved, someone she trusted, was just plain pretend? I'm so sorry." "Stop saying you're sorry," Lucas shouted, his composure finally cracking. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Do you know what the kids at school are saying to her? Do you know that I had to close my shop for 3 days because reporters were harassing my customers? That my mother had a panic attack because strangers were photographing her house? I never meant for any of that, but it happened anyway, because you didn't think about the consequences. You didn't think about what would happen when your little experiment exploded. You just thought about yourself and your trust issues and your need to test people." He laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny? I would have loved you anyway. If you'd just been honest from the start, if you'd said, 'I'm wealthy and I'm scared of gold diggers,' I would have understood. But you didn't trust me enough for honesty. You thought I was another test subject." "You're right," Vivian whispered. "You're absolutely right. I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt you first. I was so focused on protecting myself that I became the villain in my own story." Lucas wiped his eyes roughly. "Why are you really here, Vivian? What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm done. I resigned from my company today. I'm stepping out of public life, and I'm going to make sure you and Rosie are taken care of." "We don't want your money." "It's not about the money. It's about making things right as much as I can. There's a fund, anonymous, for Rosie's education. Another one for your business. You don't have to accept them, but they're there if you need them." "I don't need your guilt money." "I know, but please, for Rosie, she deserves every opportunity, and my mistakes shouldn't limit her future." Lucas stared at her for a long moment. "Is that it? Is that all you came to say?" "No," Vivian's voice shook. "I came to tell you that falling in love with you changed me, made me remember who I used to be before wealth and fear turned me into someone I didn't recognize. You made me want to be better, and I'm so sorry I realized it too late." "Me too," Lucas said softly. "Because I loved you, Vivian. Not Vivi, you. The woman who cleaned my apartment and read to my daughter and pushed her on the swings. That woman was real, even if her name was fake, but I can't trust that she was real because everything else was a lie." "She was real," Vivian insisted. "Every moment with you, every feeling, that was me. The real me, not the CEO or the billionaire. Just me. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say when our entire relationship was built on deception?" He shook his head. "You need to leave now, please. I can't do this." Vivian nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I just want you to know that I love you. I will always love you and Rosie. And I'm so sorry for what I did. She turned to leave, but Lucas's voice stopped her. Vivian? She looked back, hope and dread warring in her chest. I don't forgive you, he said quietly. I don't know if I ever will. But I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you learn to be honest with people before you destroy them. It was more grace than she deserved, and they both knew it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and silence. Vivian moved out of her penthouse into a smaller apartment across town. She started therapy 3 times a week. She volunteered at a women's shelter, teaching computer skills to women trying to rebuild their lives. She donated millions anonymously to causes that mattered: education, single-parent support, mental health services. She became invisible in a way she'd never been as a CEO, and she was grateful for it. Marcus checked in regularly with updates she didn't ask for but secretly needed. Lucas had reopened his shop. Rosie was back in school. The fundraiser had provided enough cushion that Lucas could hire that kid Danny full-time, could finally afford to expand. They were healing, slowly. The media moved on to other scandals, other stories. Vivian Hale became a cautionary tale, then a footnote, then forgotten. And through it all, Vivian kept Rosie's card on her refrigerator. 3 stick figures holding hands, a reminder of what she'd lost and why she could never let herself become that person again. On a cold December evening, 6 weeks after the disaster, Vivian sat in her new apartment, modest and quiet and honest, when someone knocked on her door. She opened it to find Lucas standing there, looking uncomfortable and determined. "How did you find me?" she asked, stunned. "Your security guy." "Marcus. He said you'd want to see this." Lucas held out a piece of paper. "Rosie drew it. She made me promise to give it to you." Vivian took the paper with shaking hands. It showed 2 stick figures, one big, one small, and between them, a space. The small figure had tears drawn on its face. At the bottom, in Rosie's wobbly handwriting, "I miss Vivi. Love, Rosie." "She doesn't understand why you left," Lucas said quietly. "She thinks she did something wrong." "God, no." Vivian pressed the paper to her chest. Can I call her? Write to her? I need her to know this wasn't her fault. That's why I'm here." Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the night everything fell apart. "I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will again. But Rosie loved you, and she's hurting, and maybe if you could talk to her, help her understand, it would help her heal." "Of course. Anything. When?" "Now. She's in my car." Vivian's heart stopped. "Lucas, I know this is crazy. I know I'm probably making a mistake, but my daughter is suffering, and you're part of the reason why, so you get to be part of fixing it." His voice was hard, protective. "But if you hurt her again, if you lie or manipulate or do anything except help her understand that this wasn't her fault, I will make sure you never see her again. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear." They went downstairs together, maintaining careful distance. In Lucas's car, Rosie sat in her booster seat wearing her purple jacket, looking small and scared. When she saw Vivian, her face crumpled. "Vivi? Hey, sweetheart." Vivian climbed into the back seat, and Rosie threw herself into her arms, sobbing. "I'm here. I'm here." "Why did you leave? Why haven't you come back? Did I do something bad?" No. Vivian held her tight, rocking her gently. "You didn't do anything wrong, Rosie. Not one single thing. What happened was all my fault. All of it." "But why?" Vivian looked at Lucas, who nodded grimly. "Tell her the truth." "Because I made a really big mistake," Vivian said carefully. "I wasn't honest with your daddy about who I really am. I lied about important things, and lying is wrong. When your daddy found out, he was very hurt. And because I lied, I can't be in your life the way I was before." "But I want you in my life," Rosie hiccuped. "I want you to come to the park and read me stories and be my friend." "I want that too, so much. But sometimes when we hurt people, we have to give them space to heal. Your daddy needs time to not be around me right now." "That's not fair." "You're right. It's not fair. but it's necessary. Vivian brushed hair from Rosie's face. Here's what I need you to understand, though. You are the most amazing kid I've ever met. You're smart and funny and kind, and none of what happened is your fault. The problem was with me, with choices I made, not with you. Do you still love me? The question shattered what was left of Vivian's heart. Yes, I will always love you, Rosie. Always. Then why can't you stay? Vivian looked helplessly at Lucas, who'd been watching the entire exchange with an unreadable expression. Sometimes loving someone means letting them go, Lucas said quietly from the front seat. Sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the people we love. That's what Vivian is doing right now, trying to protect us. I don't want to be protected, Rosie said stubbornly. I want my friend back. I know, sweetheart. Vivian hugged her once more. And maybe someday when you're older, we can talk again. But right now I need you to take care of your daddy. Can you do that for me? Can you be brave and strong and help him? Rosie nodded against Vivian's shoulder. Okay. And Rosie, I'm keeping your cards on my refrigerator, every single one, so I never forget the most wonderful little girl I've ever known. They stayed like that for a few more minutes, Vivian holding Rosie, Lucas watching silently, until Rosie's tears subsided. When Vivian finally climbed out of the car, Rosie pressed something into her hand. Herbert, the stuffed dinosaur. So you remember me, Rosie whispered. I could never forget you, Vivian whispered back. Lucas started the engine and Vivian stood on the sidewalk watching them drive away. She looked down at Herbert, at this gift from a child who loved her despite everything, and fell apart. Marcus found her there 20 minutes later, sitting on the curb holding a stuffed dinosaur and sobbing. Come on, Ms. Hale, he said gently. Let's get you inside. 3 months passed. Winter gave way to early spring, and Vivian slowly rebuilt her life piece by piece. Not the glamorous, powerful life she'd had before, but something smaller and more honest. She consulted for a few select startups, teaching young CEOs to value people over profits. She funded scholarships for underprivileged kids studying STEM. She learned to be alone without being lonely. She never contacted Lucas or Rosie. That boundary was sacred, a line she wouldn't cross. But Marcus, in his quiet way, kept her informed. Lucas's business was thriving. Danny had proven to be a natural mechanic. Rosie was doing better, though she still asked about Vivi sometimes. On a sunny April afternoon, Vivian was at the farmer's market, the same one she'd once visited with Lucas and Rosie, when she saw them. They were at a vegetable stand, Rosie insisting on the weirdest squash, Lucas laughing, and beside them, a woman Vivian didn't recognize. Younger, pretty, with an easy smile as she ruffled Rosie's hair. Vivian felt her heart crack and mend simultaneously. Lucas was moving on. He deserved that. They both did. She turned to leave, but Rosie spotted her. Daddy, look! It's... Lucas saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded market, and time suspended. Then Rosie was running toward her, and Lucas was following, and the woman with them looked confused. Vivi! Rosie crashed into her legs. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Hey, sweetheart. Vivian knelt down, acutely aware of Lucas approaching. How are you? I'm good. Daddy hired Danny for real now, and I'm learning fractions, and look... She showed Vivian her hands, now healed except for faint scars. You can barely see the cuts anymore. I'm so glad you're healing. Lucas reached them, the woman beside him. Up close, Vivian could see kindness in her face, gentleness in how she looked at Rosie. Vivian, Lucas said carefully, this is Sarah. It's nice to meet you, Vivian said, standing and extending her hand to Sarah. Take good care of them. They're special. I know they are, Sarah said warmly. Then, quieter. I know who you are. What happened? Lucas told me everything. For what it's worth, I think people deserve second chances. Even people who've made terrible mistakes. Thank you, Vivian whispered, surprised by the lack of judgment. Rosie talks about you sometimes, Sarah continued. The fun things you did together. The way you made her laugh. That meant something to her. Still does. Lucas looked at Vivian, and for the first time since the disaster, his expression wasn't pure pain. It was complicated, grief and anger and something that might have been understanding. How have you been? He asked. surviving, trying to be better. Vivian looked at him honestly. I'm glad you're moving forward, Lucas. You deserve happiness. So do you. Maybe someday, she smiled sadly. But first I need to figure out how to be honest, how to trust without testing, how to love without destroying. Rosie tugged on Lucas's hand. Can Vivian come to the park with us, please? Rosie, Lucas started. It's okay, Vivian said quickly. I have somewhere I need to be. But Rosie? She crouched down again. I'm really proud of you. Keep being brave, okay? Keep being you. Will I see you again? Vivian looked at Lucas, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Not permission, but not prohibition either. Maybe, Vivian said honestly. Someday. When you're older and you want to hear the whole story, but for now, you focus on being a kid, on being happy. Can you do that? I guess so. Vivian hugged her once more, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. Then she stood, nodded to Lucas and Sarah, and walked away through the market she'd once explored while pretending to be someone she wasn't. Behind her, she heard Rosie ask, Is Vivian sad, Daddy? Lucas's response was quiet but carried on the spring breeze. Yes, sweetheart. But she's trying to be better. That's all any of us can do. Vivian kept walking, Herbert the dinosaur tucked in her bag, Rosie's drawings in her apartment, the memory of what she'd lost and what she'd learned carved into her heart. She had tested 27 men before Lucas, searching for someone who would love her without her money. And she'd found him, found exactly what she'd been looking for. But in her fear and her elaborate deception, she'd destroyed the very thing she'd been trying to protect. The test had worked. She'd found genuine love. She'd just failed to recognize that the real test was whether she could accept it. Now, months later, walking through a farmer's market while spring bloomed around her, Vivian Hale was finally learning the lesson Lucas had tried to teach her all along. That love required honesty, that trust couldn't be tested, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was be vulnerable enough to let yourself be loved, messy, imperfect, completely real love. She'd spent years building walls to protect herself. Lucas had shown her what lay beyond those walls. A life filled with purple sneakers and dinosaur drawings, with spaghetti dinners and Saturday afternoons at the park, with love that was complicated and beautiful and worth every risk. She'd lost that life through her own fear and deception. But she'd gained something too. The understanding that she'd rather be hurt being honest than safe behind lies. That protecting her heart had nearly destroyed her soul. It wasn't the ending she'd wanted, but it was the ending she'd earned. And in the painful truth of that, Vivian finally found the beginning of redemption. She'd passed her own test by learning she never should have created it in the first place. Love wasn't meant to be tested. It was meant to be trusted, nurtured, and when you were lucky enough to find it, held on to with everything you had. Lucas had taught her that. Rosie had shown her that. And though they could never be her family now, the lessons they'd given her would stay forever. In a small garage across town, surrounded by tools and oil-stained floors and the sound of a 7-year-old girl's laughter, Lucas Ward was building a life. A real life. An honest life. With people who loved him and a daughter who made every hard day worthwhile. And in a modest apartment with a refrigerator covered in stick figure drawings, Vivian Hale was doing the same. Building slowly, honestly, toward the person she should have been all along. 2 parallel lives that had briefly, beautifully, devastatingly intersected. 2 people who had loved each other and hurt each other, and in the end, taught each other what it meant to be human. It wasn't the fairy tale ending, but it was real. And after everything, real was all that mattered. The test was over. The masks had shattered. And in the wreckage of her fear, Vivian Hale finally learned to be honest. With Lucas, with Rosie, and most importantly, with herself. It was the hardest lesson she'd ever learned, but it was also the one that would save her.